Good evening, and it's good to talk to you, although a little late this week. I'm sorry. I spent the last 2 days being a part of the Here We Still Stand conference, which has been actually done online all week. And so I've been trying to catch up with some pieces there. But what a wonderful conference it was on Christian freedom from Martin Luther's work, The Freedom of the Christian, and some deep things to consider and to learn for all of us. I'm hoping to maybe be able to get the copies of those talks and be able to present them and see if we can get people who will come and join and learn what the real intention of the freedom of a Christian is. But for tonight, as we just talk real quick, I wanted to talk again, continuing on time. This time we're going to focus on time and the individual. And the point of this is really that we need to, for lack of a better term, jettison our non-biblical understandings of work and rest and refreshment that stand opposite to what God is doing and has done and wants to do for us. He cares for us so deeply. He cares what happens to us. And he set, even in creation, a pattern of time and a pattern of doing things so that we would be blessed and also be able to go from rest to work and then on into the day. And early on, you realize the people of God, when they were created at Mount Sinai, when they were finally gathered together around the Ten Commandments and made a people, God first and talks to them about the fact that all this stuff is being done because He's the God who's brought them out of Egypt and out of bondage and out of slavery. And He's longing for them to experience this rest that takes us right back to the Garden of Eden with this rest that we're supposed to be experiencing, and we left because of our sin. But He still calls us into a rest, a real rest. And so when people ask, early on, after God creates the Ten Commandments and creates a people, they start asking questions like, who is God and what's He like and what does He want for people? And he provides those answers basically in the Ten Commandments. But specifically, one commandment overall is a part of our discussion on time and the individual. And that one commandment is the third commandment. And that third commandment, of course, is to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But when it reads out of the book of Exodus, it says it this way: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you will labor and do all that work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your sons or your daughters, your male servants, female servants, livestock, even the visitors who are within the gates. Because in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and the sea and all that's in them, and He rested on the seventh day. Therefore God blessed the Sabbath day, and He made it holy. That's from Exodus chapter 20. At the beginning of the walk of the people of God moving towards the promised land. But then it comes up again in the book of Deuteronomy after the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, and the people now are finally ready and prepared to go into the promised land, those who have survived that experience. And now God changes the command from being something that has to do with creation to really what has to do with the redemptive work of God. He puts it this way in Deuteronomy: you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and with an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. That's Deuteronomy 5. It's no longer an emphasis on creation, but now an emphasis on the redemption that God has made for His people. He's always desiring and always longing and always wanting to give us rest, to provide for us rest, a true rest. He is the God of rest, and especially for a group of people who were once slaves but now are free. He wants them to understand what this rest means. And unfortunately, today we spend a lot of time running and being overly active, and we think rest is what happens on the weekend after a long week of work. And we literally, as one Mike Breen described it in the 3M Ministries, that we just fall into rest. we're so exhausted that we fall into rest, and then we barely can rest, and then we're back up and we're into the work of the week again on Monday. I think maybe um, some comedian had talked about the fact that they were so glad when Monday came around because the weekend was even so unrestful from them, from all their attempts at leisure, that they needed to rest at work. But you see, what we're missing really is that, again, in time, God creates everything with a rhythm. God creates everything with a way that is meant to care for and to take care for and provide for the people that he loves and that he's desired to be with him. And we have to remember that when you read a commandment in the Bible, you need to remember it says what it says, but it also implicitly says what it doesn't say. So in other words, if it says don't do this, what it does say is you should do this. It's not a one-sided don't. It's a you should do this instead as the option. In other words, God's option versus the world's way. And including in this is the rest and rhythm of refreshment and work, and all that falling under God's rhythm that he created. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but if you pay attention and go look back at that text from Genesis in chapter 1 with the creation, and you get this long list of things, and people, oh, yeah. God's creating, da-da-da-da-da. But the rhythm is laid out right there. God created something on the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, and there was evening, and then there was morning, and the next day. Do you hear the subtleness of that? It doesn't start with morning, getting up and running full steam into something, and then there's an evening where you come home and rest, collapsing into it, not having any time for yourself or your family or refreshment of all the people who are part of your life, friends, family, and others. But it starts with rest in the evening, a time where you're meant to sleep, a time where you're meant to be refreshed, a time where you're meant to give your brain a time of refreshment from all the chaos and the craziness of the world. And so what God says to us is, in that very simple introduction to his creation, is I've made this whole thing in a way to take care of you. But not only just rest, but also the Sabbath rest, the resting in God's presence, the spending personal time with God. So many people are still struggling and just absolutely besides themselves, as I continue to see it in conversations and listening to it on Facebook and other discussions and things. And it came up again even in this conference. We were talking about how people are just absolutely out of whack in this whole thing because in their free time, they've decided to fill it with more things. Ooh, now I don't have to go to work, so I'm free to do more. And so they try to do more instead of resting in the way God is calling them to rest, to spend time in a truly important thing, which would be to go outside and play catch with your son, or to play games with the family, or to read books, and to just spend time in loving, including the book called the Bible, and the way God talks to us about how he's trying to find a way for us to come and join him in his way, to open a door in our hearts that we would say we want to be a part of that rest. Again, Mike Breen talked about it being like a pendulum. And what happens is we swing from this work and we swing into rest, and then we swing back into work. But actually, the pendulum for Jesus, if you pay attention throughout the Gospels and you read what Jesus did, he didn't go out and work and then go and rest. He went and rested. He went away to a quiet place. He went and prayed. He went and was refreshed with God and heard what he was called to do, and then he went into work to do the things that God wanted him to do. He makes rest happen so that our time in work can be diligent, but not crazy. And so many people overworking and overdoing, and myself having been a part of that, I'm really diligently working again to regain control of my life. So, you know what? This rest thing again, I've got to gain control for my own well-being and benefit. I have to make sure that I find refreshment and I spend time. It's been some wonderful stuff going on this week as I've just been able to be a part of this conference and just spend time thinking in theology and looking at God's word, and not also to include my sermon study and everything else. Wonderful stuff. And God offers that to us every week. But even more so, even the Lord's Supper. We're sacramental people as Lutherans. We are people who are meant to experience and then live out the sacraments. And even the Lord's Supper is a pattern for what he's calling us to do, to come and experience the foretaste of the feast to come, gathering with friends and family, to thank God for what he's done and what he's doing, to sing and to laugh and to share time together. And that isolation of these things has created a falsity as well in the life that we live. The best thing you can basically do, and for yourself, and again, I've been in a sense saying this throughout this whole time of COVID, is to enjoy putting your personal time in the right perspective and order. Many people still aren't coming to worship, and I understand it if there's a fear or whatever, but in real true retrospect, you might want to ask yourself the question, am I continuing to leave myself in an isolated place where I'm missing the promises and the gifts of God? Or am I bettering myself by being at home and alone? The church is made to be a community. The church is made to be a body that gathers together. The church is made to be a group that walks and talks and shares and sings and struggles and laughs and loves, all under the umbrella of a God who has blessed them and loves them and freed them from bondage and slavery, even to themselves, in respect to time. God's put a rhythm in the world. Will you join the rhythm? Will you allow yourself to work to put away the things that are stopping you from being in that rhythm? Will you seek to find ways to spend time, diligent time with God, to talk with him and read the word and gather with his people and study with them and go serve, and all these things that God offers us as a way to experience his presence in the midst of a very difficult world? And not only are we then refreshed and strengthened, but in our diligence of our work, which is now focused and directed, others see the joy and the glory and the possibility of what God is offering. COVID isn't over. Certainly isn't. Don't know when it will be. But God's still got a rhythm. He's always had a rhythm. It's never changed since the beginning of time. And again today, he's offering you, come and be a part of that rhythm. Come, and those of you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Put my yoke, my teaching upon you, my way of life, so that you can be free. Because if the Son sets you free, you are free indeed. Wouldn't that be a wonderful blessing to begin to experience in a true, concrete way, in a walk of faith, rather than just at a distance and a longing and a hope? God bless you. I hope to see you at worship and hope to be seen by the others. Have a good night.